The observation post Pathfinder drifted silently along the border of Concord space, its sensors constantly scanning the void. Lieutenant Marcus Chen sat at the communications array, his fourth consecutive shift blending into a haze of routine protocols and standard reports. The Concord regarded these monitoring stations as pointless relics, diplomatic concessions to humanity's paranoid insistence on maintaining a defensive perimeter. "Another 6 hours of absolutely nothing," Marcus muttered, rubbing his eyes. His console chimed unexpectedly, a sound so rare that for a moment he didn't recognize it. A signal, weak but persistent, was threading its way through subspace. Not on standard Concord frequencies. This was coming through on the emergency distress band that hadn't been used in centuries. "Captain Reeves," Marcus called, "we're receiving a mayday." Captain Allison Reeves crossed the bridge in 3 long strides, her expression shifting from boredom to focused intensity. "Source: Aurelia System, 3rd planet. Signals degraded, but—" He paused, enhancing the audio. The bridge filled with a voice speaking formal Concord standard, but fragmented and broken by static. "Under attack. Unknown vessels. Planetary defenses failing. Casualties in the millions. Request immediate." The message dissolved into unintelligible noise before repeating. The bridge crew stared at one another in disbelief. The Concord hadn't seen armed conflict in over 7 centuries. "Verify authenticity," Reeves ordered, but her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Transmission contains valid Concord diplomatic codes, Captain. This is real." Reeves activated the secure channel to Earth Fleet Command. "This is Captain Reeves of the Pathfinder. We've intercepted a distress call from the Aurelia system. They're under attack by unknown forces." She transmitted the recorded message, requesting permission to investigate. After a tense minute, Admiral Jessica Hayes herself appeared on the view screen. Her weathered face had earned its lines through 3 major Earth conflicts. "Captain, we've confirmed your finding. The Concord Council has been notified and is convening an emergency session." Hayes' mouth tightened into a hard line. "They're estimating 48 hours before they can reach a consensus on an appropriate response. With respect, Admiral, the Aurelians might not have 48 hours. My assessment exactly." Hayes' eyes flashed with decision. "I'm mobilizing the fleet. The Dauntless Battle Group can reach Aurelia in 6 hours. Your vessel will rendezvous with them at the jump point." "The Concord hasn't authorized military intervention," Reeves pointed out, though her tone made it clear this wasn't a protest. "I'm not asking for their permission, Captain. We've spent 2 decades being treated like dangerous children, our ships confined to the edges of civilized space." Hayes leaned closer to the screen. "But now someone's worlds are burning, and we're the only ones with the means to do something about it." Within 30 minutes, the Pathfinder was moving at full speed toward the designated coordinates. Behind them, throughout human space, naval vessels were disengaging from their patrols. Civilian ships were being evacuated from potential combat zones, and reserve officers were being recalled to active duty. The Concord ambassador appeared on an emergency channel, his multiple eyes blinking in agitation. "Admiral Hayes, the Council requires you to stand down immediately. This matter must be addressed through proper diplomatic channels." Hayes' response was transmitted across all Concord frequencies. "Ambassador, while your Council debates, people are dying. The United Earth Fleet is responding to a distress call, as any civilized society would. We will arrive at Aurelia in 6 hours. Your diplomats are welcome to join us once they've reached their consensus." She terminated the connection before the ambassador could respond. On the bridge of her flagship Dauntless, Hayes studied the tactical display. 26 combat vessels were converging on the jump point, not the entire fleet, but enough to make a difference if they arrived in time. She had likely just ended her career and possibly provoked an interstellar incident, but the choice had been clear. Humanity had spent centuries fighting its own brutal wars, learning lessons written in blood. Perhaps now, those hard-won lessons would save an alien world. If not, They would at least ensure that the Aurelians did not face their end alone. All ships report ready, Admiral, her executive officer announced. Hayes nodded. Then let's go answer that call. Commander Ryan Miller felt his stomach lurch as the dauntless battle group dropped out of FTL on the edge of the Aurelia system. The tactical display immediately lit up with warning indicators, and the bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed the horror before them. My God, someone whispered. The fourth planet of the system, Aurelia Prime, hung in space like a wounded animal. Great swathes of its surface glowed molten red where cities had once stood. Its atmosphere was choked with ash and debris, and hundreds of biomechanical vessels swarmed around it, methodically bombarding the few remaining population centers. Weapons hot. All ships assume combat formation Delta, Admiral Hayes commanded, her voice steady despite the apocalyptic scene. Deploy defensive screen around the remaining colony on the moon. Miller's fingers flew across his console, relaying orders to the fleet. His vessel, the Resolute, took point position, its reinforced hull designed to absorb the initial assault. Unknown vessels approaching, Admiral, reported Lieutenant Vasquez. No response to hails on any frequency. Miller studied the enemy ships through the view screen. They resembled enormous metallic insects, their hulls pulsing with an internal blue light. No visible weapons ports, yet the devastation below spoke to their destructive capability. They're targeting us, Miller warned as his sensors detected energy buildups across the alien fleet. Impact in 3-2. The deck bucked violently beneath them as the first energy blast struck the Resolute's forward shields. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship. Shield capacity at 60%, Miller reported, rerouting power. Their weapons technology is unlike anything we've encountered. Hayes' expression hardened. We didn't come here to observe. All vessels, engage the enemy. Protect the surviving Aurelians at all costs. The human fleet responded with disciplined precision, decades of training overcoming the shock of facing an actual alien adversary. Railgun batteries opened fire, sending hypersonic rounds streaking toward the closest enemy vessels. Point defense lasers activated, targeting smaller craft that veered toward the beleaguered moon. Miller felt the old combat reflexes returning, muscle memory from the South American campaign taking over. Flanking maneuver, sections 2 and 3. Draw their fire from the evacuation transports. The Resolute shuddered under another impact, more violent than the first. A console exploded on the far side of the bridge, and emergency medical teams rushed to aid the injured crew member. They're adapting to our shield frequencies, Miller observed grimly. Rotating modulation now. Below them, Aurelian evacuation ships struggled to break orbit, laden with civilians. 3 of the insectoid vessels broke formation, accelerating toward the defenseless transports. Intercept those ships, Hayes ordered. Don't let them reach the civilians. Miller directed 2 destroyers into position, but they wouldn't arrive in time. Without hesitation, he altered the Resolute's course, placing his ship directly between the attackers and their prey. Brace for impact. The enemy weapons fire struck with devastating force. The Resolute's shields collapsed, and armor plating along the port side vaporized under the alien energy beams. Return fire, all batteries. The human vessel's main cannons responded, unleashing a barrage that tore through the lead attacker's hull. The enemy ship shuddered, its blue internal light flickering and dying as secondary explosions rippled across its surface. Direct hit, Miller reported, allowing himself a moment of grim satisfaction as the enemy vessel broke apart. They can be killed. The battle expanded across the Aurelian system, human ships engaging the alien vessels in dozens of smaller conflicts. What the newcomers lacked in advanced technology, they made up for in tactical experience and sheer determination. Admiral, Miller called, studying a new sensor reading. We're detecting survivors on the planet's surface. Several million life signs, concentrated in underground shelters. Hayes nodded. Deploy ground teams. Get those people out. As dropships launched toward the surface, Miller received an incoming transmission from an Aurelian frequency. The universal translator struggled with the dialect, but the meaning was clear. The harvesters came without warning. You are the first to stand against them. Miller looked out at the battle raging across space, human vessels now fighting alongside the few remaining Aurelian defense ships. For centuries, humanity had been judged for its warlike past. Now that same past might be the galaxy's salvation. We won't let you face them alone, he promised, as the Resolute turned to engage another wave of the enemy. The ship's AI designated the alien attackers with a classification, Harvester-class hostile entities. The name would spread throughout human forces, a fitting descriptor for an enemy that seemed intent on consuming everything in its path. For the first time in 700 years, war had returned to the peaceful Concord, and humanity was ready. Lieutenant Samantha Rodriguez watched with barely concealed frustration as the Concord delegation boarded the Resolute. Their ceremonial vessels had finally arrived 3 days after the initial battle, gleaming and pristine, looking more like luxury cruise liners than military craft. The contrast with the human fleet, battle-scarred, running on emergency power in places, crews exhausted but vigilant, couldn't have been more stark. Remember, Commander Miller had told her, they're not soldiers. Be patient. Patience, however, was wearing thin as she guided the Concord representatives through the Tactical Operations Center. The alien officials moved with the unhurried grace of bureaucrats who had never faced a deadline more pressing than an upcoming administrative review. This is our current defensive perimeter, Rodriguez explained, gesturing to the holographic display of the Aurelia system. Red markers indicated confirmed harvester positions, while blue showed the human fleet deployment. We've established emergency evacuation corridors here and here, protected by overlapping fields of fire. Senior Envoy Xalan, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin, studied the display with an expression Rodriguez couldn't read. Fascinating. Your vessels appear to be arranged in, what is the term? Formation. Basic combat deployment, Rodriguez replied, trying to keep the edge from her voice. The same principles have been used in Earth naval engagements for centuries. How quaint, another diplomat murmured, as if discussing an indigenous cultural practice rather than tactics that had just saved millions of lives. Rodriguez bit her tongue and continued the briefing. We've recovered data from destroyed harvester vessels. Our analysis suggests this isn't an isolated incident. She brought up a new display showing a pattern of star systems along the galaxy's outer rim. These systems have gone silent over the past decade. No communications, no transport activity. We believe the harvesters have been systematically working inward. The Concord representatives exchanged glances. This is most distressing, Xalan said, but we must not jump to conclusions. Perhaps there is a peaceful explanation. Rodriguez couldn't help herself. Peaceful? Have you seen the surface scans of Aurelia Prime? There are craters where cities used to be. What Lieutenant Rodriguez means, interjected Captain Emily Watson, stepping smoothly into the conversation, is that we should prepare for all contingencies while diplomatic channels remain open. The diplomatic veneer cracked slightly as Xalan's skin darkened with emotion. The Concord has maintained peace for 7 centuries through dialogue and mutual understanding. We have no protocol for this. We do, Rodriguez said quietly. Humanity has protocols for this. Later, after the Concord representatives had retired to their quarters, Rodriguez found herself in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the devastation visible even from orbit. Captain Watson joined her, offering a cup of coffee. You did well today, Watson said, considering the circumstances. Rodriguez took the coffee gratefully. They don't understand what we're facing. They've never had to fight for their existence. That's why we're here, Watson replied. So they don't have to learn those lessons the hard way, like we did. A communications alert interrupted them. Captain Watson to the bridge. Priority message from Concord Central. When they arrived, Admiral Hayes was already on screen, her expression grim. "The harvesters have been detected in the Proxima system. 3 more Concord worlds are under attack." "Our fleet is still securing Aurelia," Watson protested. "We can't divide our forces." "We won't have to," Hayes answered. "The Concord Council has formally requested Earth's military assistance. They're granting us unrestricted access to all Concord space." Rodriguez exchanged a stunned glance with Watson. After decades of being treated as dangerous outsiders, humanity was suddenly being invited into the heart of Concord territory. "There's more," Hayes continued. "They're asking for our training protocols, weapons schematics, and tactical doctrines. The Concord is reactivating their defense forces, such as they are. They want us to teach them how to fight." Watson shook her head in disbelief. "They've spent centuries dismantling their military. Most of them have never even seen a weapon fired in anger." "Then we'll teach them," Rodriguez said, a fierce pride welling up inside her. Humanity, long judged for its violent history, now found that history to be its most valuable contribution. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," Hayes said, "you're being reassigned. You'll lead a training cadre at the Concord Central Station. They need instructors who can speak their language but think in ours." Rodriguez straightened. "Yes, Admiral." As the communication ended, Rodriguez looked again at the tactical display. The galaxy was changing before their eyes. Humanity, once the dangerous newcomer kept at arm's length, was now the shield the Concord desperately needed. "They're about to learn," Watson said quietly, "why you should always be nice to the barbarians at the gate. Someday, you might need them." Captain Michael Taylor stood in the massive docking bay of Earth's Lunar Military Academy, watching as the shuttle carrying the first group of Concord officer candidates approached. 6 months ago, this facility had been a museum, a relic preserved to commemorate humanity's past conflicts. Now, it hummed with activity as Earth's military-industrial complex roared back to life. "Never thought I'd see the day," remarked Colonel Jackson, the Academy's commandant. "Aliens coming to us to learn how to fight." Taylor nodded, tugging at the collar of his dress uniform. The scars on his neck from the Battle of Aurelia still felt tight. "They learn fast, or they die. Simple as that." The shuttle docked with precision, its sleek design contrasting with the utilitarian human vessels surrounding it. The airlock cycled, and 23 Concord representatives emerged, representing 8 different species. Taylor recognized the distinctive crystalline exoskeleton of the Novari, the tentacled Melusians, and the mercurial Tellurians whose liquid bodies flowed within containment suits. "Welcome to Earth's Lunar Military Academy," Taylor announced, stepping forward. "I'm Captain Taylor. For the next 8 weeks, I'll be turning you from diplomats and administrators into officers capable of defending your worlds." A Novari stepped forward, light refracting through its translucent body. "I am Exertal, Chief Coordinator of Novari Collective Defense. We appreciate your instruction." The slight hesitation betrayed the cultural discomfort with the concept. "Appreciation doesn't stop harvester weapons," Taylor replied bluntly. "Follow me." He led them through the facility, past firing ranges where human Marines practiced with kinetic weapons, simulation chambers where tactical officers ran battle scenarios, and engineering bays where technicians integrated Concord technology with human weapon systems. "Your first lesson," Taylor said as they entered a large classroom, "begins with understanding why you failed." The statement caused a ripple of discomfort among the Concord representatives. "Failed?" questioned a Melusian, its tentacles curling defensively. "The Concord has maintained peace for 7 centuries. Peace isn't an achievement when no one's attacking you," Taylor countered, activating a holographic display. "This is Aurelia Prime before the Harvester attack." The display showed a verdant world of sprawling cities and pristine wilderness. "And this is after." The image shifted to a scared, burning landscape. Your Concord had no early warning system, no defensive fleet, no evacuation protocols. Billions died because you chose to believe that peace is the natural state of the universe. We rejected violence as a solution to conflict, the Melosian insisted. And now you're here, Taylor said, learning violence from us barbarians, because the alternative is extinction. The room fell silent. Finally, Duzertal spoke. What would you have us learn first, Captain? Taylor's expression softened slightly. That defense isn't about wanting conflict. It's about being prepared for it. Earth united its military forces after centuries of internal warfare because we learned that lesson the hard way. He brought up a new display showing the integrated Earth Fleet command structure. First, we establish a unified chain of command. Your respective species have different strengths and capabilities. The Novari computational abilities make you natural strategists. Tellurians can infiltrate enemy vessels. Melosians understand three-dimensional naval warfare better than any species I've encountered. As he spoke, the alien representatives began to engage, asking questions, noting details. Despite their cultural aversion to military matters, their survival instinct was kicking in. In the adjoining hangar bay, engineers were already retrofitting Concorde vessels with human weapon systems. The elegant ships were being transformed from ceremonial transports into warships, their gleaming hulls now housing railgun batteries and missile launchers. Admiral Hayes's voice came through Taylor's comm unit. "How are our students progressing, Captain?" Reluctantly, "Mom," Taylor replied, stepping away from the group. "But they're motivated by fear, if nothing else." "Fear is a start," Hayes said. "We need them combat-ready within 3 months. Intelligence suggests the harvesters are massing for a push toward the core systems." Taylor watched as a Novari tentatively handled a tactical display unit, its crystalline appendages learning the controls with surprising dexterity. "They're not soldiers, Admiral. They've spent centuries believing warfare was beneath them." "Neither were we once," Hayes replied. "Before the resource wars, Earth was heading toward its own version of the Concorde. Disarmed, complacent. Those conflicts nearly destroyed us, but they also forged us into what we are now." Taylor understood. Humanity's bloody history, long viewed as its greatest shame by the Concorde, had prepared them for this moment. The wars that had nearly consumed Earth had also taught lessons that might now save the galaxy. "We'll be ready," Taylor promised, watching as his alien students began their first tentative steps into the world of military discipline and tactical thinking. The Concorde was awakening from its centuries-long pacifist dream, and humanity was its alarm clock. Captain James Wilson watched his tactical display with growing dread as another human destroyer disappeared from the grid, overwhelmed by harvester vessels. The Proxima Line, humanity's hastily established defensive perimeter, was collapsing faster than anyone had anticipated. "Signal from the Intrepid," reported his communications officer. "They've lost engine control and are venting atmosphere on 3 decks. Wilson's jaw tightened. "Direct the Vigilant to cover their retreat. Have medical ships standing by at Waypoint Charlie." His executive officer, Commander Diane Reynolds, leaned close. "Captain, we've lost 30% of our combat strength in the last 6 hours. The harvesters are adapting to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones." Wilson knew she was right. For all their technological advantages, the human fleet was being worn down by the sheer numbers and rapid evolution of the enemy. What worked in one engagement was countered in the next, as though the harvesters were sharing tactical information instantly across their entire swarm. "Admiral Hayes is on priority channel," announced the comm officer. Hayes's face appeared on screen, the Admiral looking as though she hadn't slept in days. "Captain Wilson, status report." "The line is breaking, Admiral," Wilson replied grimly. "We're seeing new harvester configurations with improved shield penetration. They're targeting our command and control systems specifically." Hayes was silent for a moment, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. "The Concorde Council has been informed. I'm ordering a strategic withdrawal to the Epsilon sector. All remaining vessels are to escort civilian evacuation ships from the outer colonies." Wilson processed the implications quickly. "Epsilon sector. That's abandoning over 20 settled systems." "I'm aware of the cost, Captain," Hayes replied, her voice hardening. "But we can't hold this line without unacceptable losses. Better to retreat, consolidate our forces, and develop countermeasures." After the transmission ended, Commander Reynolds voiced what everyone on the bridge was thinking. "The Concord representatives on board won't accept this easily. Selpham Prime is in one of those abandoned systems." As if summoned by her words, the ship's intercom activated. "Captain Wilson, Concord Delegate Moreau requests your immediate presence in Conference Room A." When Wilson arrived, he found 4 Concord representatives waiting, their normally calm demeanors replaced by barely contained agitation. Delegate Moreau, a tall humanoid with scaled skin in iridescent blue, confronted him immediately. "Is it true? Are you abandoning the outer systems?" Moreau demanded. "We're conducting a strategic withdrawal," Wilson corrected, maintaining his composure. "The current defensive line is unsustainable." "Unsustainable." Another delegate, an avian peregrine, spread her wing arms in distress. "My homeworld is in the Sylphan system. There are billions of my people there, and we're organizing evacuations," Wilson assured them. "But our priority must be preserving our combat capability. If we lose the fleet here, there will be nothing standing between the harvesters and the core worlds." Moreau's scales darkened with anger. "This is unacceptable. The Concord granted humans military authority because you claimed you could protect us." "No," Wilson countered sharply. "You granted us authority because after centuries of peace, you have no idea how to fight a war. This is what war looks like, Delegate. Sometimes you sacrifice ground to save your forces." "We will not accept this," Moreau stated coldly. "Our vessels will remain to defend our homeworlds." Wilson met his gaze steadily. "Your ceremonial ships against harvester capital vessels. That's not defense, it's suicide." "Then perhaps we need leaders with more courage," Moreau suggested, his hand moving subtly toward what Wilson realized was a concealed weapon. In a single fluid motion, Wilson disarmed the delegate, twisting the unfamiliar weapon from his grasp. The other representatives backed away in shock. "That's the difference between us," Wilson said quietly, placing the weapon on the table. "You think courage means throwing your life away. We know it sometimes means making the hard call to retreat, to survive, to fight another day." He looked at each of them in turn. "I understand your worlds are at risk. Mine too. Earth itself will be threatened if we don't make the right decisions now. We're evacuating as many civilians as possible, but I will not sacrifice this fleet in a hopeless stand." A tense silence filled the room before the peregrine delegate spoke. "What would you have us do, Captain?" "Help us coordinate the evacuations," Wilson replied. "Your people will listen to you. And when we reach Epsilon Sector, help us understand the harvesters better. There must be a weakness we haven't found yet." As the delegates filed out, Commander Reynolds entered. "Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the UES Defiant. Captain Green reports they've discovered something about harvester attack patterns." Wilson felt a spark of hope. "Put it through." Perhaps this long retreat wouldn't be the beginning of the end, but merely a painful step toward victory. Commander Rebecca Anderson studied the holographic representation of the Harvester command ship, its massive form rotating slowly above the briefing table. 14 kilometers long, bristling with weapon emplacements, and surrounded by a defensive screen of escort vessels, it was the most formidable target she had ever been assigned to destroy. "You're sure this intelligence is accurate?" she asked, glancing at the Novari analyst beside her. Gdurtal's crystalline form shimmered under the holographic light. "The data was obtained at great cost, Commander. 3 stealth vessels lost, 17 crew members sacrificed. The quantum entanglement signatures are unmistakable. These command ships coordinate harvester battle groups across vast distances." Anderson nodded grimly. She had led the reconnaissance mission herself, barely escaping with her remaining ships after confirming the existence of these massive vessels. The operation had cost her good people, friends she had trained and fought alongside. The simultaneous strike against all 3 targets will require perfect coordination. she said, addressing the assembled team of human and alien officers. Each task force will have a narrow window to deliver their payload before the harvesters can respond. Lieutenant Daniel Cooper, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the hologram, pointed to the command ship's central section. Our Melosian colleagues have identified what appears to be the central processing node here. Their sonar mapping technology detected resonance patterns consistent with quantum computing architecture. The Melosian representative, Commander Velos, rippled his tentacles in agreement. Our analysis suggests a concentrated strike on this area would disrupt their ability to coordinate fleet movements across multiple systems. Cooper had spent months developing a neural interface that allowed humans to understand the complex sonar-based language of the aquatic Melosians. What had begun as a military necessity had evolved into something more, a genuine cultural exchange that transcended the immediate crisis. The assault teams will be mixed units, Anderson continued. Human tactical experience combined with specialized capabilities from our Concord allies. Tellurian infiltrators will breach the outer hulls, Novari navigators will calculate precision jump coordinates, and Melosian sonar operators will map internal structures in real time. She toggled the display to show the approach vectors. We'll be utilizing the chaos doctrine developed by Captain Green. Randomized approach patterns, unpredictable maneuvers, and constantly shifting formation. Intelligence suggests the harvesters struggle to adapt to truly chaotic tactics. Commander James Wilson stepped forward. My task force will target the largest command ship in the Cygnus sector. It's the deepest insertion, highest risk. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what highest risk meant in this context. Once the command ships are neutralized, Anderson concluded, we anticipate a 48-hour window of confusion among harvester forces. All available vessels will be positioned to exploit this advantage and push back their advance. As the briefing ended and officers dispersed to their assignments, Anderson found herself standing alone with Exertal. The Novari's crystalline structure had dimmed, a sign of deep contemplation in their species. You have concerns, Anderson observed. Not about the strategy, Exertal replied. About what comes after. For 7 centuries, the Concord maintained peace through dialogue and mutual understanding. Now we learn warfare from humans. Adopt your tactical thinking, your willingness to sacrifice. Anderson considered this. My grandfather kept a collection of ancient human weapons, swords, spears, projectile firearms. I asked him once why he preserved instruments of death. He told me they were reminders of what we overcome, but also what we might need to become again. She gestured to the star map showing harvester-controlled territory. Humanity's history is written in blood, yes, but that history taught us that sometimes survival requires fighting. The Concord can return to peace when this is over, carrying the wisdom that peace must sometimes be defended. Zertal's form brightened slightly. An elegant perspective, Commander. Perhaps this is why humanity was meant to join the galactic community, not despite your history of conflict, but because of it. The preparation for Operation Thunderstrike continued throughout the fleet. On the hangar deck of the Valiant, Tellurian infiltrators practiced phasing through mock harvester hull materials, while human marines calibrated their weapons. Novari navigators worked alongside human pilots, calculating jump coordinates of impossible precision. Commander Wilson inspected his strike team one final time. The diverse group before him, humans standing shoulder to tentacle with beings from across the galaxy, represented something unprecedented. The fusion of humanity's combat experience with the unique abilities of Concord species. We launch in 6 hours, he announced. Remember your training, trust your teammates, and complete the mission. The entire galaxy is counting on us. As his words echoed through the hangar bay, Wilson felt a strange sense of purpose. Humanity had spent its history fighting itself, only to discover that those painful lessons had prepared them to defend not just Earth, but all sentient life. The Concord Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Jessica Hayes finished presenting her strategy. The massive circular hall, designed for harmony and consensus, now seemed to vibrate with tension. "To be absolutely clear," said High Counselor Vex, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence, "you propose using Earth itself as bait. Your own homeworld." "I do," Hayes confirmed, standing firmly before the assembled representatives of 100 species. Operation Thunderstrike was successful beyond our expectations. 3 Harvester command ships destroyed, their fleet coordination disrupted. But our intelligence now confirms what we suspected. They're specifically targeting Earth. Dr. William Morgan stepped forward, the civilian scientist looking out of place among military officers. His holographic display showed a complex pattern of Harvester fleet movements. "The data is unambiguous," Morgan explained. "After we destroyed their command ships, the Harvesters didn't retreat or consolidate. They redirected toward Sol system with unprecedented focus. They're looking for something specifically on Earth." A murmur rippled through the council chamber. A representative of the avian peregrine rose, her feathers flaring. "What could possibly draw them to your world with such determination?" Hayes exchanged a glance with Morgan before answering. "We believe they've detected traces of an ancient vessel buried deep beneath Earth's surface. Initial scans suggest it shares certain technological signatures with Harvester ships." The revelation caused an uproar. Questions came from all directions, but Hayes raised her hand for silence. "We don't have all the answers yet. What matters is that we have the Harvester's attention, and for the first time, we can predict their movements with certainty. This gives us an opportunity to set a trap on our terms, in territory we know intimately." "And your people?" asked Counselor Vex. "You speak of using your homeworld as bait, but Earth has billions of inhabitants." "The evacuation has already begun," Hayes replied. "Priority transport for civilians, with Concord worlds hosting refugees. Meanwhile, we're converting Earth into a fortress." The holographic display shifted to show the Sol system, where defense platforms orbited Earth, hidden weapon installations dotted the lunar surface, and minefields nestled among the asteroid belt. "The plan is elegantly savage," commented Exertol, the Novari military liaison. "Allow the Harvesters to penetrate deep into the system, then spring multiple layers of ambush. The very tactic humanity used against itself in ancient land wars, now scaled to interstellar combat." Hayes nodded. "We're counting on the Harvesters' single-minded focus on their objective. They'll detect minimal resistance and push forward aggressively, committing their main fleet. When they're fully engaged, our combined forces will strike from hidden positions." Not all council members were convinced. The Tellurian representative's liquid form rippled with agitation. "This plan risks everything on a single engagement. If it fails, Earth is lost, and our combined fleet with it." "War always involves risk," Hayes responded firmly. "But fighting on multiple fronts against an enemy that outmatches us in numbers guarantees defeat. This strategy gives us our best chance, perhaps our only chance, of turning the tide." As the council deliberated, Hayes stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the Concord Capitol. Major Brian Thompson joined her, his uniform bearing the insignia of Earth's Special Forces. "How's your team progressing with the excavation?" Hayes asked quietly. "Slow going, Admiral," Thompson replied. "Whatever's buried under the Antarctic ice sheet has been there for millennia. But initial scans confirm it's definitely the same technology as the Harvesters. The question is whether it's a weapon we can use or just the bait that draws them in." Hayes gazed up at the unfamiliar constellations of the Concord homeworld. "Either way, we'll be ready. Your team has 3 weeks to extract whatever you can from that site before we need to evacuate the remaining personnel. And if the Council rejects your plan..." Hayes's expression hardened. "Earth has never asked permission to defend itself, Major. We'll proceed regardless." When they returned to the chamber, the Council had reached a decision. High Counselor Vex addressed the Assembly. "For 7 centuries, the Concord maintained peace through dialogue and understanding. But we now face an enemy that permits neither. Admiral Hayes's strategy is adopted by majority vote. All available vessels will be committed to the defense of Sol system. As the meeting adjourned, Hayes received a priority communication from Earth. The holographic face of General Alexander Matthews appeared before her. Admiral, the Antarctic excavation team has made a breakthrough. They've accessed the central chamber of the buried vessel. Matthews reported, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. It's not a weapon, Jessica. It's a key, some kind of control mechanism for the entire Harvester collective. Hayes felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this gambit would be more than a last stand. Perhaps it would be the turning point that saved the galaxy. Secure that site at all costs, she ordered. I'm returning to Earth immediately. The battle for Earth unfolded across the vastness of the Sol system like a deadly choreography. Admiral Jessica Hayes stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching as the Harvester fleet emerged from FTL at the system's edge. Hundreds, then thousands of biomechanical vessels darkening space itself. They took the bait, Commander Elizabeth Foster reported, her voice steady despite the overwhelming numbers displayed on the tactical screen. Harvester Vanguard is advancing through the outer system. Minimal scanning activity, just as we predicted. Hayes nodded. Maintain emissions control on all vessels. Let them think they've caught us unprepared. Throughout the system, the combined human Concord fleet waited in silent ambush. Ships powered down to minimal life support, hidden behind planets, moons, and within the debris fields of the asteroid belt. On Earth, civilians had been evacuated, leaving behind a planet transformed into a fortress. Weapon platforms disguised as orbital habitats. Defense systems concealed beneath the ocean surfaces. An entire world prepared for the most significant battle in galactic history. Harvester main fleet approaching Mars' orbital path, reported the Novari tactical officer, Xertal. They are accelerating toward Earth. Long-range sensors detect unusual energy readings from their flagship. It appears to be scanning specifically for the artifact's signature. In the Antarctic base, Major Brian Thompson and his mixed team of human and Concord specialists worked feverishly to understand the ancient vessel buried in the ice. The excavated chamber hummed with power that had lain dormant for millennia, glowing control surfaces responding to their presence. The translation is incomplete, reported Dr. Navian Sharma, but we've confirmed this was created by the same civilization that built the Harvesters. They called themselves the predecessors. Thompson studied the holographic interface. And the Harvesters, originally terraforming systems, Sharma explained, designed to prepare worlds for colonization. But something went wrong. The predecessors vanished. We don't know why. And their creation evolved, developed autonomy. This control vessel contains an emergency shutdown protocol. Then we need to activate it, Thompson insisted. Sharma shook his head. The protocol requires direct interface with the Harvester's central consciousness. Someone would need to deliver the command code directly to their flagship. Thompson's expression hardened. Then that's exactly what we'll do. In orbit, Hayes watched as the Harvester fleet approached Earth, their massive flagship leading the formation. Just as they passed the Preset marker, she gave the order that would echo across human military history. All vessels, execute Operation Homeground. Weapons free. Throughout the Sol system, humanity's trap was sprung. Stealth minefields activated along the Harvester's path, tearing through their escort vessels. Hidden defense platforms emerged from concealment, unleashing coordinated fire on the suddenly vulnerable fleet. The combined human Concord Armada powered up and attacked from all sides, catching the Harvesters in a devastating crossfire. They're adapting, Foster warned as the initial shock of the ambush faded. Harvester vessels are forming defensive clusters and returning fire. Hayes had anticipated this. Execute Phase 2. All vessels implement Chaos Doctrine. The human Concord fleet broke into smaller, unpredictable formations, executing the randomized attack patterns that had proven effective against the Harvester's adaptive tactics. Yet despite the success of the ambush, the sheer number of enemy vessels threatened to overwhelm them. Admiral, came Thompson's voice over the secure channel. "We have the shutdown protocol, but it must be delivered directly to the Harvester flagship's central processor." Hayes considered the tactical display. The Harvester flagship was pushing toward Earth, surrounded by layers of defensive vessels. No conventional attack could reach it. "I'll take it myself," she decided. "Commander Foster, you have command of the fleet." Foster's protest died on her lips as she recognized the resolve in Hayes's eyes. Within minutes, Hayes had transferred to a modified stealth insertion craft, accompanied by a small team of volunteers. The ancient control key, a crystalline matrix containing the shutdown code, was secured in a specialized containment field. "This is Admiral Hayes to all vessels," she transmitted. "Continue the engagement. Draw their attention while we deliver the package." As her craft accelerated toward the massive Harvester flagship, Hayes thought of Earth's long history of warfare. How ironic that a species once consumed by conflict would now use that hard-won knowledge to save a galaxy that had judged them for it. The infiltration was brutal. 3 of her team fell in the initial breach. 2 more sacrificed themselves to clear a path through the Harvester defenses. Hayes pressed on, the ancient key clutched in her hand, navigating the alien corridors mapped by Melosian sonar specialists during previous encounters. Finally, she reached the central chamber, a massive space pulsing with the same energy signature as the Antarctic artifact. At its center, a swirling vortex of information, the Harvester's central consciousness. "For Earth," Hayes whispered. "For all of us." She stepped into the vortex, the shutdown key extended before her. Pain beyond imagination flooded her senses as her consciousness briefly merged with the vast alien network. In that moment, she understood what the Harvesters were, what they had become, and why they must be stopped. The key activated, sending the ancient command cascading through the entire Harvester collective. Throughout the system, across the galaxy, the biomechanical ships faltered, their coordinated assault dissolving into confusion. Hayes's final transmission reached the fleet as the Harvester flagship began to power down. "The mission is complete. Remember us not for our skill in warfare, but for what we chose to defend."